Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills. Whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how do you unlock the full potential of your team, no matter where they are in their personal or professional development? How do you understand the different stages of growth? How do you get them to a place where they're more effective leaders? How can the team achieve more success together? Well, today on the Speak with People podcast, I am blown away and honored to have a guest that I've been following for a long time. One of my speaking business heroes, idols. I've learned so much from him from afar. I could go into quite the biography of him. I will say this, he speaks an awful lot on stages all over the world. He helps communicators, leaders, and with companies that are just mind-blowing. I'm just beyond honored to have Arel Moodie on the show. Thank you for being here and welcome to the Speak with People podcast.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you get an introduction like that, that's worth the price of admission to be on a podcast. That's very, very kind. And I'm looking forward to this conversation very much.
I love it. Well, hey, before we hop into the conversation, could you give us a little bit more of your story, who you are, what you do, what's brought you to this place?
Yeah. So, I've been a professional speaker now for 18 years. So I've been doing this for some time. 750,000 people roughly have been spoken to, 48 states, 5 countries. And my journey into professional speaking started with entrepreneurship. So if we go all the way back to kind of where the marker started, I was in college. I got introduced to entrepreneurship, started my first company, which was an off-campus housing service, basically helping college students find places to live off campus. My mentor said, you got to go to professional development events. You don't really know much, and, go to these like conferences, and they were all terribly boring. And I genuinely believed at that time when I was younger that was the price of admission. You got to sit through boring. And then one day there was this incredible speaker who had just lit up the stage, and I was like, what the, like, you could do that? Like, that's like, this is and I remember seeing that and going, I don't know what that guy's doing, but I want to do that for the rest of my life. So I got really, really curious in speaking and started actually speaking to students, because I was advised I could give advice from a big brother perspective. So that was kind of my entry point into speaking, which was college students, high school students, and did that for many years. And as I was speaking, I created and ran different businesses in kind of conjunction with it. So one of them was called, I ran with some wonderful partners called the Extreme Entrepreneurship Tour. We had taken the country's top young entrepreneurs, built $1 million businesses, and got on a tour bus and went all over the country spreading the gospel of entrepreneurship. Before, when we were doing it, it was like back in 2008, 9, 10. It was subculture. It wasn't really it wasn't what entrepreneurship is today, which is, what we wanted it to be. From there, got into doing speaking, just kind of full-time and not the event planning side. And more recently, I have started something called Talkadot. So Talkadot is a software that is a tool speakers use to get feedback, capture leads, and grow their email list and that kind of fun stuff. So basically everything that I've done over the last 18 years has revolved around speaking. Speaking got me a show on Disney Plus called Family Reboot, which a producer saw some of my speaking and said, you ever thought about doing TV? And I was like, no, let's do that. I've been featured in, media, but speaking has been, and then, by proxy of what we're going to talk about today, communication's been the kind of center point of it. And now a lot of my speaking, which I'd love to go into on this podcast, talks about this research called adult development theory on how people develop and how you can actually unlock them by understanding their stages of development. So that's where I do most of my speaking now. So I'm really straddling the world of tech entrepreneur and speaker right now.
Wow. And you even, if I could be so bold, left out, I mean, you're a multi-time TEDx speaker. and
3 TEDx talks. Yep.
you've spoken at the White House a few times. I mean, there's just
Twice.
like
Yeah, yeah,
just incredible. I love it.
yeah.
We've got a lot to get to, but I do want to ask. We have a lot of listeners that are working hard to get to a place where they speak at a TEDx event.
Mhm.
Any three? I mean, three times. My goodness. Any initial advice? Any? Hey, do this. Don't do this.
Yeah, so there's a philosophical and practical way to answer that question, right? So the philosophical is really get good at one thing
Mm.
that you want to talk about, right? Like understand something that you think actually is an idea worth spreading, and approach it from a perspective that is not kind of worn too much, like
Mm.
going out there going, imposter syndrome. Like, yes, that imposter syndrome is an important topic, but if you just say imposter syndrome exists, we all experience it, and you shouldn't, that's not really an idea worth spreading because that idea has been, but if you have a new way of looking at imposter syndrome or a new way to uncover it. So philosophically, that's numero uno, right? Like have an idea that's worth spreading. So develop something.
Mm.
Practically, TEDx has a website that has all of their upcoming events. If you genuinely are like, I want to do a TEDx talk, I think it's like TED.com/TEDx/events. I could be wrong, but if you Google
Mhm.
TEDx events, there's a website and it has all of the upcoming events. Some of these events have a call for speakers. Some events they reach out to speakers, they have a roster and they're all taken care of. But some events they do a call for speakers, they let people submit, and then they might have like 5 people they invite and 3 people that get to submit. So you just kind of find one that if you did get accepted to, you actually would, because like if I live in Houston, Texas, and there's a TEDx talk in Orlando, Florida, and I get accepted to it, I got to be aware there's pre meetings, there's pre event work. You
Right.
got to fly there, So usually either somewhere local or somewhere you don't mind going to is going to be really important. But yeah,
Mm.
you can just go to the website, submit, and then it's a little bit of luck, a little bit of chance, a little bit of fortune, but that's the practical thing to get into it.
Oh, amazing. I love it. Well, let's hop in and talk about this
Yeah.
adult development theory.
Mhm.
I remember watching one of the videos that I have watched with you talking about how companies kind of have one of two problems, around profits or people. And I would love to be able to dive in. Why is this adult development theory such a powerful tool for leaders? How does it help with their people? How does it help them move forward?
There's lots of problems we have, but I think the two big categories, if you think about it, are people problems and profit problems. Because if you
Mm.
have an abundance of profit and you've got really good people, everything else really, in my opinion, is not really a problem,
Right.
right? Having the right butts in the right seats so that
Yep.
they're doing the right job. And obviously, profit is the lifeblood and oxygen of all businesses, so we need that. And everything else really isn't that big. Now, I happen to believe that when you have the right people, the profit problems get solved.
Mhm.
So if you spend a lot of your time as a, as a leader, right? We might feel like we're babysitting people sometimes. It might be like, I want to run a legit like organization, and sometimes it feels like I'm an adult daycare for children.
Mm.
So understanding how to unlock the potential of your people, and this research is really fascinating because most people never heard of it before, but it goes over that all adults pass through these predictable and sequential stages of development. Each one of these stages has different characteristics, traits, core drivers, fears. And if you understand them, you can actually better communicate to your team. A lot of times, if we're a manager, a leader, or a salesperson, and we're having people related problems, it's because we're either communicating and it's falling flat, or there's strife or stress, or people we're not getting the most out of them from a performance perspective. So,
Mhm.
understanding these stages will actually show you how to speak to people in a way that they actually want to be spoken to, and it's really predictable, and the research over the last 60 years have proven it. So it really becomes a way of solving people problems that I think most people just don't know about.
Wow. Do you find in your work with companies, larger companies are on the end of investing in learning and development and the growth of their people? Smaller companies, maybe they just think they don't have the funds and so they don't do it. Is there a breakdown, a mixture? I mean, what are you finding?
Yeah, typically I find people invest in money when the problem is big enough, or the
Yeah.
pain is relevant enough. If I
Yeah.
think like, oh, there could be a very large company and they just don't value learning and development, so they just don't do it. There's other companies like, I just spoke to a credit union that probably had a couple of dozen employees, but every year they do an all staff development day,
Mm,
because that learning and development is important at least annually. Like they like to do more of it, but
yeah.
obviously like resources are there. So typically it's how big of a problem there is, and the belief system of leadership that this methodology, this is the best allocation of resources,
Mm,
because some people think, oh, let's just fire them and hire a headhunter and get better people, or let's churn and burn. Some people have a culture where they just grind people to the bone, kick them out and get someone to replace them, and they're just so highly coveted that that's okay. So I think it's less about size and more about value system of the leadership within those organizations.
so good. Uh, Earlier, kind of talked about the stages that people go through.
Yeah.
What are some of those predictable stages that, the team walks through?
Yeah, so there's what's called pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional stages. I spend all of my time on the conventional stages because that's where about 85% of the population lies.
Mm,
The first stage is called the self-centric stage. The best way to understand this stage is that this is the stage where I am the most important thing, getting, winning. It's really about me and how far I advance. The
yeah.
the next stage that comes after that is called the group centric stage. This is where your identity becomes the group's identity. So this is where you might see,
Wow.
just for examples, like people go, "Oh, us conservatives, us liberals, us Democrats, us Republicans." So
Yep.
what happened is the group is me. So if you attack the group, you attack me, right? Like, and the group values are a little bit different. It's a little bit about following the rules of the group. There's an in group, an us, and there's an out group, a them. So the thems act in a certain way that's different than the us's.
Ooh,
And in this group, it's all about adhering to the us and being kind of the glue that holds groups together. And there's a significant more nuance on all of these. I'm just going through them quickly here. And then there's the skill centric stage. So after we do group centric, there's skill centric. So after the group's identity being my identity, the next identity that I have is what I do. So what I do is who I am, right? So
wow.
my skill. How good am I a leader? How good am I at a manager? How good am I at, HR? Whatever is the thing you do becomes your identity. And then the final stage is called the achiever stage in the conventional. And in the achiever stage, it's more about goal setting, it's more about moving organizations forward, it's more about understanding how people tick, it's more about long-term goals and achievements. So it's more about what you achieve is who you are, and it's a distinction that's there. There's post conventional stuff, which if we have time to talk about, I'm happy to, but it's a different, it's just a different ball game. But those are the main stages. And so if I'm in the, for example, if I'm a leader and I'm in the achiever stage, and I'm dealing with a employee or a coworker that's in the self centric stage, I'm speaking achiever language to a self-centric person, and it ain't working.
Right.
It ain't gonna work, because self-centric cares more about how do I get something right now? And achiever is more about how do I achieve a goal in like a year, 2 years, 3 years, and there's gonna be natural conflict there.
Wow. I was laughing as you were going through them because I was thinking back, and I hope I'm not so much in the self-centered phase anymore, but thinking back specifically in my 20s. Oh my goodness. Like when you said I'm the most important, like that was, I'm like, wow. For me, I think it took age and a few, kind of big, uh, somewhat of failures to be able to go, wait a minute, I'm going to go about this the wrong way. How do you find, for most leaders, is it age and experience? Is it failure? Is it, seasoning? How do they move from that first phase onto more the group
Yeah.
centered?
So movement between phases is actually, there's lots of things that can cause movement, but typically it's that you're not getting what you want out of life.
Mm,
That so a lot of times people say age and wisdom and all that has truth to it, but the reality is if you're in the self-centric stage and you're getting what you want out of life, you're achieving your goals, you're crushing it, you're gonna stay in the self-centric stage. Typically, what happens as a way to summarize it is someone will move from the self-centric stage to the group-centric stage when they go, you know what? I've been doing this lone wolf thing.
Mm,
I've been doing this me versus the world thing, and it ain't working. I'm not happy. I'm not achieving the things that I want to achieve. It's lonely, it's sad. I need something else. And the
yep.
thing that you typically need is to be part of community, to feel like you belong somewhere. And that's where groups up. Now, what group you decide to create your identity with, it's timing. There's no guarantee. Like I could become a Harley Davidson, with leather and beard and drive bikes, or I could become a pickleball player, and it's like I'm all about pickleball, and pickleball are my people, or karate, or like if you look at any type of group that has a culture. So typically, someone has to become aware that they're not getting what they want out of life. And if I was a
Mm,
manager or if I was a leader and I was dealing with someone who's self centric, telling them that they're making mistakes and telling them that they're wrong will typically be met with resistance and friction, and you won't get there. But
yeah.
a phrase that you can use, a question you can use that's actually really, really good for the self centric stage is, how has that been working for you?
Mm,
So if I'm dealing with someone who's making poor choices and I see them as poor choices, I can say, "Hey, I know that you're trying to get ahead and you have all of the materials to be someone really great. And I notice you keep doing this. How's that been working for you?" And then that
wow.
person has to get uncomfortable with, it's not. Hey, if that's not working, let's try
Wow.
this to get your goal. That's like where you'll get more magic out of your people.
Wow. Wow. All of a sudden, because my brain sort of thinks in TV shows and movies, you're just running through like all the, I mean, I just rewatched Ted Lasso. So I'm like, okay, it's just a Jamie Tart right here. He's in the
Yeah.
self-centered phase and he's the star player and he's, trying to get to the group centered. I mean, it's just,
I need to watch Ted Lasso because I've had so many people reference to me. Because when you go through all the stages, I've had multiple people come up to me and say, "You've pretty much explained the Ted Lasso like growth journey," and I'm like, I don't get that pop culture reference, and I think I need to solve that. And you've brought it up again. But apparently, if you watch Ted Lasso, he goes from self-centric to group-centric to skill-centric to achiever. I can't confirm it, but apparently it's a thing. Apparently it's a thing.
oh yeah, no, it's absolutely, absolutely. And I'm already thinking about, so many other sports movies that are, you've got the star and, he's trying to do it all on his own. And, it's just happening. What for a team that's kind of into the group centered, as they add somebody from the outside, do you think teams are hesitant to add people or new people because they kind of start to gel so well together? Are they able to create a culture where no matter who's added, you kind of step into a system? Kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, so what's important for a group-centered organization, and group-centric is actually really powerful for organizations. I actually think it's
Mm,
the most powerful stage that a company can develop time and energy in. Because if I join your organization or company and I now go, these are my people, these people are my people, I am them, they are me, then you create a really, really good work environment. Now, to create that, you need two things. You need written rules and unwritten rules of
mm,
what your culture is. Now let me just dive a little bit deeply into that. If I walk into a um, Taco Bell, it feels very different than if I walk into a Starbucks,
mm,
right? There's written rules of like, this is what we serve, this is what we do. Now here's what's interesting. In theory, and I use air quotes if you're just listening to this, in theory, they both care about customer service, quick, quality, all of those things, and all the things that every company would care about. But the type of employee that's attracted to Starbucks versus the type of employee that's attracted to Taco Bell, not that one is better than the other, it's just different because
mhm,
Starbucks has this unwritten rules of how they interact with the world, and they have written rules of how they do, like, personal time off, and we'll help pay for your schooling, and they'll do things like that that make you feel like, oh, I'm a part of something. So I always would tell an organization, become aware of what are your written rules, like these are things we do, and what are unwritten rules. So an example of an unwritten rule, certain work cultures, you handshake people, and that's what you do. There's
Mm.
other companies, you hug people. You walk into a room, everyone's hugging each other. That's what's called an unwritten rule. Now, there's no rule saying in this place we hug and in this place we
Right.
handshake, but those there's different companies that will be like, we're huggers over here and we're like professionals. So those are things that are kind of unwritten. So being aware of what culture you would want that you as a leader can actually exemplify is going to be helpful in building a sense of these are my people, I'm part of them, they're part of me.
Wow. I love that. What would you say to the team leader, the VP, the owner, who's listening to this for the first time and he's like, boy, I don't even know where to start. What are some ways for that team leader to kind of get, organized around these and kind of get his team going in the right direction?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing is become aware of where your cancers and the things you hate are. Kind of list
Ooh.
those out. Those
Ooh.
are always easier to um those are easier for people to identify, right? So give me example of the stuff you hate. Give me the example of the stuff that like feels cancerous or organizationally and feels frustrating. Now, the opposite of that is typically going to be the thing that you want. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what gets in the way of the opposite of that? So, for example, one of the biggest things that here's where group centric gets really interesting. A lot of organizations and companies I work with deal with silo problems,
Mm.
meaning this department has no conversations with this department, or leadership is seen as one group and frontline staff is seen as the other group. So, my
Yep.
group is actually my frontline staff and my us is my frontline staff, but my them is leadership and management.
Mm.
Or my us is the, product side of our company and the them is the, whatever other side of the like. So what happens is people create these silos and their us's and thems are actually within the organization. And if your us and them is within your organization, everyone's going to fail because now I am working for the same company you are, but I have different interests and different goals. So the bringing to people together. So like if you look at again, I'm just using Starbucks because it's a very easy one though. It's kind of like a little like overused. Um, I imagine, and I've never worked there, but I imagine that the management team and the frontline staff don't feel like it's us versus them. Maybe some do, but for the most part, when you walk in, it seems very collaborative. It seems very like, I'm
Hmm.
part of it. So, language that I recommend, and again, every culture is different. So, this is just a general recommendation here is I prefer the terms like team member versus employee. I don't like terms like I have people that work for me who refer to me as their boss, and then I'll be like, please don't like because the moment I say things like boss, I'm creating a hierarchy.
Mm.
And in my particular work culture, I prefer to be like, look, I know you know who I am and what I do, but I don't need you to give me that title because that title creates a separation that's unnecessary. So in some places, being consciously aware of, using we language, using us, using team member, so be aware of the cancers, be aware of what you want, and then
Wow.
be aware of what separations you might be creating through
Yep.
certain actions you may not like.
Whew, I love that. I love that. I've worked for smaller organizations, large organizations. Now, started to speak with people. We're a company of two or three right now. But in the past, some of those organizations that have kind of, you have the C-suite leaders over here. Nobody has access to them. You hardly see them around the regular people. Uh, I get it that the higher you go, the bigger organization, there's more demands and all that kind of stuff. But I've also seen it done where you just laid out. There is a way where, as a team, we're not setting some people apart. That's where my life was just wrecked when I read Primal Leadership from Daniel Goleman, who was
Mm.
like, for years, the American workplace was like, we lead out of fear, we lead out of control. And he's like, no, if you actually tap into people's positive emotions and you do it as a team, you'll get, great success. What's your advice to someone who works in one of those organizations that, they've been there for a while, they've been hanging on, maybe because they have fear of their own, stepping out into the unknown, but, leadership leads out of fear. There is that separation, and they're afraid of them. They're afraid of leaving. Any thoughts you'd have to that person?
Yeah, it's always challenging when you want to see change and you don't.
Mm.
But I'm a big believer in the idea of control the controllables. In any work culture, in anything, there's things you can control, and there's things you can't. Where I see most individuals within organizations that I, work with and talk to, where I see them going, "Oh, you're running in a complete wrong direction, trying to see a sunset," is that their belief is once they, again, us versus them, once they change, once they make better rules, once they understand what's really important, then we
Yep.
will be able to achieve the things. And what they're doing is they're putting all of their power into this waiting game for someone else instead of saying, what are the things that I have control over? What are the things that I actually have domain over? And
Yep.
focusing on, how do I get the best out of that? How do I give the best version of myself? How do I create that? And I think if more people focused on what they could control, you would see more movement. Where if I go, well, you know what, you don't give me this, so I can't do that. So until you give that to me, I'm not going to do it. Now I've given my power externally to someone else, and that always leads to, oh man, the moment you give your power to someone else and you say, well, I can't until you are powerless. And as long as you say, well, what do I have control over? What do I have domain over? And focusing on that, that's where you can start seeing magic. And I think sometimes you just need to shift people's perspectives to do that, because a lot of times a leader can't make a decision because it's not like I don't want to, like, I'd love to give this to you, but I can't, like, I don't have the like, you can't get blood from a rock, but
Right.
what can we do? And that's where I think magic happens.
Wow. Well, that's positive. That's powerful. When we're in the third stage with the skills centered.
Yeah.
Uh, what do you do if you're the employee who you're in a role, you do it well, but it doesn't really line up with the skills that you're at, and no one's really quite listening. Like I've
Yeah.
got a different skill set.
Yeah. So when you're skill centric, what you do is who you are. So if you're like, hey, I want people to acknowledge my skills more. I think I'm really, really good at this. Like, I'm a really, really big believer in uh, ask for forgiveness and not permission,
Hmm.
right? So in a world where it's like, hey, I'm really good at, say, graphic design, and no one's taking advantage of this like incredible like skill set, like our social media channel, like, I'm making this up, like, let's say I work for a company and I really want to do social media and I'm really, really good at it. Permission is, give me permission to take over your social media channel and make images and let me show you how great it would be. What I would recommend doing is actually create like 10 images, 10 posts, 10 different things, create them and share that with the person who's currently in charge of social media and say, hey, listen, I wanted you to get this. I think these would be really cool. You can
Mm,
post them. You don't have to give me any credit. Like, you don't need to say anyone. Like, I just thought these would be really cool. And I just don't have an avenue to do so. So if there's a place where you think this could fit in, please go ahead and you do it without looking for credit, attention, or what, because most people do things as a quid pro quo. If I
right.
do this, you'll give me this.
Right.
If you actually give and say, I'm just going to give. Now, the fear that people have is, well, if I give, you'll take advantage and control of me, which is a self centric, typically, it's a self centric philosophy of like, you're going to take advantage of me, so I'm not going to do it. But if you come from a place of like, no, no, I want to give, because the cream always rises to the top.
Mm,
I've seen it a million times over. If you're really, really, really good at something, if you're excellent at something, people will, like, as an example, will get in line at a really crappy ambiance pizzeria if the pizza's damn good, right? So if you got damn good pizza, people will show up. So it doesn't matter, like, the product is the most important thing. So whatever you're good at, create. Yes. Is it extra time? Yes. Is it probably going to be outside the hours you get paid? Yes. Is it probably maybe not going to land the first time you do it? Yes. But you can't ignore greatness. You
mm.
can ignore okayness. You can ignore satisfactory. You
Yep.
can ignore bad, but you can't ignore greatness. And your job is to put greatness in front of them until you become, like, it's stupid for us to not take advantage of it because it's so valuable.
Wow. Wow. Absolutely. Any thoughts, advice you'd give to uh, a team leader who wants to kind of create this continuous growth and growth, not gross, growth and development in their team? What's something they can keep their eye on as they want to
Uh,
keep pursuing this?
Yeah, what gets inspected gets respected.
Oof.
So
Wow.
what that means is, if you, and I think my friend Jonathan Sprinkles once said that to me. So shout out to Jonathan for that quote. But what gets inspected gets respected. So if I give someone something for growth and then I completely move on from it as a leader, I just be like, "Hey, you did that course, right? Like, good. See, I gave you the course and I can move on with my life and do whatever." You gotta be like, "What did you get from it? What did you
Mm,
take from it? What do you think you can pull and bring into the organization day to day?" Like, you've gotta actually look into it. So if you want continual growth, you've gotta inspect where the growth is and what you want to see and get a back and forth dialogue. What a lot of people do is they're like, "I gave it to you. Could you just be happy and leave me alone so I can do the things that I wanna do?" But if you inspect stuff, people go, "Oh, this is actually important to them." If it's important to you, it becomes important to your people over time.
wow. Wow. I had interviewed Deanne Turner on the podcast a couple months ago. She had worked for Chick-fil-A for 35 years, was their VP of people at one point. And, boy, you and her just sum that up, put a cherry on top, like what, I mean, it's just brilliant and beautiful. And it's like if more business owners, VPs, C-suite, team leaders kind of wrap their minds around that, how powerful. Kind of lastly, as we're turning the corner, we talk with a lot of middle managers, in here. And so we talk with, their boss and then their team members. And then they get to this new role of being in the middle management. What a tough role, because now you've got to learn how to pour into the people that you used to do the job, and you're fighting, still wanting to do the job, but letting them mess up and letting them succeed, especially when it comes through thinking through this, with an adult development theory. What advice do you have to those middle managers, for them to be able to find success, growth with
Yeah.
their new teams?
Well, typically, but not always, but typically the way someone gets promoted is because they're really good at what they do.
Mm,
So for example, if I'm really good at making widgets, they go, "Man, you're so great at making widgets. We should promote you to a middle manager so that you can help other people make widgets." But really, your skill is in making widgets, is not necessarily in the skill of leadership. So one of the things that I would encourage people to do is to look at management as a skill. Look at it not as something that you're just forced into doing, but this is actually a skill that I can improve in. There's ways to do it, there's ways not to do it, there's ways to do it in this, particular context that's different than others. So, if you are skill centric and you're really good at what you do and what you do is who you are, those people typically, but not always, they make really bad managers.
mm,
The reason they make bad managers is because they always believe they can do it better themselves. If they delegate, they take it back because they're like, "Well, I gave it to you, but like you're not going to do it the way I'm going to do it." Or if someone creates a result, you're like, "That's not nearly as good as the result I would have created." So then they kind of like poo poo on it. And then the team's like, "Well, why am I trying so hard if you're just going to reject everything I'm going to do every way, or you're going to give it to me and take it back because I know what's going to happen?"
right.
So what the manager has to do is go, number one, 80% of me spread out over 5 people is better than 100% of me isolated, right?
Mm,
So, like, it may not be as good, but if I can spread it out over people, I can be more effective. And two, management is a skill, leadership is a skill. And you have to be the kind of person that goes, I want to develop that skill, right? I want to develop, because some people are individual contributors, they're ICs, that like their happiness is in turning the widget. That's where their joy. And if that is your happiness, maybe you shouldn't be a manager, right? Like that's a very important question to ask yourself.
yep.
But if you do want to grow and you have to look at management and leadership as a skill and look at it as something you can develop on. And if you look at it as this is the skill now, no longer is my skill simply making the widget, my skill is management, then it might start changing your personal view of yourself, like, and how you view who you are. And that will help unlock a little bit of your ability to do
Wow.
the role more effectively.
Wow. Wow. I love that. So powerful. I know that'd be so helpful to many of our listeners. I'm so curious from personal end, what what got you to the place where you were like, we've got to start Talkadot? What was that kind of implosion of things that went, this was a real need out there, and
Yeah.
you came up with this kind of this solution idea.
As a speaker, there's like two kinds of speakers. There's celebrities and content experts, right? So like you and I are content experts. No one's coming to a conference because they see my name on the billing, right? Like that's not a draw. But if you're interested in the content, and it's a good experience, then people are like, wow, I really got something out of it. The
Right.
challenge is, for most speakers, you got to start from scratch every month. You're starting basically from zero.
Yes.
every single month. So it doesn't matter if you gave 20 speeches in February, March, you're starting from 0 again. And that always was one of those things that I hated about the industry, that like it doesn't matter how good I was last year, it doesn't guarantee I'm going to be great next year, right?
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was figure out the idea, kind of, with like Pokin Young and Jared, who's our CTO. Like, it wasn't just me, but the idea behind it is, how do we actually take good speakers and help them demonstrate, one, how actually good they are, because that doesn't exist in our space. There's no way. The only way I know how good Jason is because Jason tells me, and Jason puts it on his website, and I have to like trust that Jason's telling me the truth, or I've seen Jason. But there was no third party, kind of like the reason why I trust Amazon reviews or Google reviews or Yelp reviews, because those are third party. Wanted to be able to take the experience of audiences and say, like, hey, here's what people are saying over time. But then also, in every audience, there could be one or two people that could say, oh my gosh, I want to bring you
Yep.
to my group. But that process is typically very difficult and clunky, because if you do a good job as a speaker, you have a group of people that come up to you. So if you're someone who wants to book the person, maybe you can get to the front of the line, or maybe you're like, that line's too big, I'm not going to wait on this line, like it's too, and you leave. Or if you're in an event and another keynote speaker comes up and you can't get up to meet the keynote speaker because they went to the back of the room, or there's workshops and you've got to leave to go to the workshop, there's all of these like
Yep.
friction points that get in between. So we
Yep.
wanted to be able to create that third party reference, with data that is quantitative and qualitative and not editable by the speaker, so it's real, and for people to be able to easily identify themselves who do want to work with that speaker more and present that. And if I could have that, I would be super happy, because
Absolutely.
I don't have to start from scratch every single month. I can like build off of the momentum of my previous by using that data to showcase it, by finding leads from my current. And the other thing is build my email list. Most speakers, they might speak to tens of thousands of people. I've spoken to 750,000 people, like roughly in my career. I do not have 750,000
Right.
people on my email list, right? I wish I did, because that
Yeah.
would be a big, everyone knows like your business is in your list. So most speakers have a huge opportunity to build a list and a following, and they just waste it every time they speak. So if you could solve those problems, you can make life easier. So that's where the impetus came
Wow.
from. It's something that would solve problems for me, and it just so happened that thousands of other people have similar problems too.
Wow. Do you find in your own speaking, in what you've talked to others, the most success, where the most success comes in the journey on the stage to asking them to do the survey? That's probably not the clearest way to say that. Have
Yeah,
you found when the best place is to ask? Uh,
Yeah, I always typically find the best place to ask for feedback is right before you go into your closing
mm,
statement, right before then. The reason why that's the best time to do it is because if you've ever been at an event and it ends, and then someone sends you like a survey monkey link or a Google Forms link afterwards, and they say, could you let us know what you thought? You almost never fill it out, right? The only people
right.
who fill that out are the people who really hated you or really loved you, right?
Yeah.
And you miss everyone in the middle. But if you actually in the middle of in not in the middle, but in your presentation right before you're closing, the last 5 minutes, you've already delivered most of your content, and you ask people to scan a QR code and give you feedback for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then launch into your closing, you'll capture 60 to 80% of every audience almost every single
It's
time.
good.
So you're getting much more feedback. You're creating intentional space for them to do it now. And if people do it now, they will do it.
Yeah.
If you say, "Hey, I'm gonna send you a link via email, make sure to click on it," it's like, "Good luck, buddy. That
Forget
ain't
about
gonna
it. Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna happen." So
Do you
that's when I typically find is the best.
do you attach a lead magnet with it or something free or something, like, hey, if you fill this out, I'd love to send you this.
Yeah, so I always give away something that falls into one of two categories. Category one is a summary of what I just spoke about,
Yeah.
because most people, they take notes, they miss things, they take pictures. So I always tell people, hey, don't worry. I'm going to give you a summary of everything we talked about, so you're not going to miss anything. Or I'm going to give you a copy of my slide deck at the end, so you're not going to like, you can revisit this whenever you want. So I either give a summary because that's really valuable to people, especially if they want to revisit your content, or I give them a next step I want them to take because they heard my content. So like, hey, I'm super excited. Like, like I just learned about communication from Jay. I'm really excited about it. I could get a summary of it, or I could be like, the next time you have a meeting, here's the framework I want you to use to have a successful meeting. And I'm going to give you that as a template so you can use it. Like, start with this, then move this, then go here, then go there. Now I can take your information and take action with it. So whenever someone gives me
Love that.
feedback, giving them either a summary or a next step will, one, benefit them, but you'll also see a much higher response rate because people want the carrot, they want the thing, and as long as that thing is valuable, you'll
Yeah.
see, upwards of 80% of every audience willingly giving you feedback.
I love it. And one of my last speaking engagements a few weeks ago, I was in Salt Lake City at the prestigious Salt Lake City Country Club
Yep.
for Mountain America Credit Union, working with some of their advisors on their communication skills. And towards the end, they put me right after lunch, which I was like, oh boy. And then we're in this room with a fireplace going. It's like 80 degrees. People are like fanning themselves. So I get to the place, and I'm just in between them going to golf, this incredible country club. And
Sure.
needless to say, my response wasn't as good as the next day when I was in Dallas, and people weren't dying because of the heat, and they didn't have a, world famous golf course to go golf. So
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
was a good lesson.
I always say that environmental factors, cold, early, those are the biggest ones to overcome,
Yep.
because, like, if I'm freezing and tired and hungry, good luck.
Yep.
Best of luck.
Yeah, yeah. I was coaching a young speaker, and I, they said, what's one of the most important lessons you've learned recently? And I'm like, if you have it, the ability in a pre-call to ask for an earlier time slot, a couple, temperature in the room. I was in Charleston last month, and again, it was like 78 degrees. People are fanning themselves, they're in suit jackets. I'm like, I don't care if you're like Simon Sinek on steroids. Like, in order to keep people's attention when it's hot,
Yeah.
it's whew.
Audio, good audio. If I have a microphone that is not clear, so the sound is hard, and I gotta pay attention to listen to you, it's much easier to talk to the person next to me than to listen to you. You gotta pull out all the theatrics. You gotta, like, run into the audience. You've got to
Yep,
do, parent shares. You gotta do a lot of
yep.
interaction because environmental, like, you've got to have good temperature, good sound, full bellies. It's very it's if you can set yourself up for success, those are really, really important factors.
I love it. Well, this has been brilliant. I can't thank you enough for opening your vault and sharing so much wisdom. I do want to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Do
We're
it.
building an online resource for leaders, speakwithpeople.com/skills library. It's an online document. We've asked all 160 some of our guests, some of their favorites. So it's a great resource to go to kind of spur on some, different things that maybe people are missing. But we talk a lot about speaking on here. Do you have a favorite speaker? Ooh, I know that's tough, but is there somebody that consistently you're just like, oh, they just knock it out of the park? They're continuing to learn. You love to pass them on to other people.
Oh man, that's a tough one. I know so many speakers. There's the obvious answer, which is like Tony Robbins. Like, I'm a big TR fan. I've consumed a ton of his content. I've been to a ton of his live events. So I think his ability to hold people's attention for 12 hours, his
Yeah.
ability to be extremely philosophical, but also extremely practical. He's been at it for decades. So from a purist perspective of the art, I've seen him take thousands of people who are strangers and turn them into the best of friends within a few hours. And I generally think there's very, very few people that can hold a candle to what he can do in a room.
I love it. If you're a podcast listener, I know not everybody is, but if
Yeah.
you are, is there a podcast that's either guilty pleasure or development that you just keep coming back to, you love to pass on?
I am not an avid podcast listener, but I am starting to listen to this really cool podcast called Speak with People, and I think a lot of people should find that
Well,
one
thank
out.
you. Appreciate that. And then
Yeah,
lastly, is there a book that you're like, boy, every leader, if you don't read another book the rest of your life, you've got to read this book.
yeah. It is called. Man, I was just, right here. I highly recommend this book. If you're on video, I just brought it on camera. It's called The Three Laws of Performance by Zaffron and Logan, Rewriting the Future of Your Organization and Your Life.
Mm,
It is a phenomenal, phenomenal book, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people could benefit from what's in it. Three Laws of Performance.
I love that. Okay, so if I'm a team leader, if I work for a company and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to get you to come in to work with us. Where's the best place they should go online to find out more information about you?
So the wonderful thing about my name, which is Arel Moodie, is I'm the only Arel Moodie in the whole world. So if you go
Awesome.
to LinkedIn and put in Arel Moodie, if you go to arelmoodie.com, if you go to Instagram and put in Arel Moodie, if you go to Google and put in Arel Moodie, whatever search result you'll find, I'm the only one. So I don't have a name like, Jack Smith, where there's going to be 1,000 of me. So if you are listening to this and you're like, hey, I want to know more about adult development theory, I want to know more about how I like to potentially bring this to my organization, all staff retreats, annual conferences is where we do a lot of our work. Just go to arelmoodie.com or type in Arel Moodie and you'll see a bunch of Google search results. Click on any of them and
It's you.
you'll find me and not anyone else.
I love it. There's three other Jason Rateses, and one of them got Jason Rates at Gmail years ago, and I reached out to him. I'm like, we have the same name. We should like connect sometime. I
Yeah.
got back an email. He said no. I was like, all right.
That boy was not about that life. He was
He
like, there's
was
only
not.
one Jason that matters to me, and it's not you.
It's not it. And then lastly, for speakers, I use Talkadot. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Where should they head to find out, more about Talkadot and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, if you want to talk a lot, get yourself some Talkadot. So go to talkadot.com. So TALKADOT.com. TALKADOT.com. Go to talkadot.com, get yourself a free account. Say, when we ask you, how'd you hear about us, make sure to put Jason's name. We always are curious, and you'll, if you put Jason's name, you'll get a free account and you'll be able to use our tool and get an upgrade for 30 days. And if you don't like it, you can use a free version forever. So just put in Jason's name, Jason, or Speak with People, one of the two, and you'll get hooked up.
Awesome. And I'll be sending that out to my speaker friends, because it's part of I've added it to my coaching package now, to where when I'm working with speakers, I'm like, this is just something that is just it's just brilliant. A friend of mine introduced me to it. And so I'm like, I've got to just keep passing this on, because it's been amazing. So thank you for your time. I mean, I know your schedule's full, and, to be able to communicate and have this kind of conversation with someone with your experience, knowledge base, and your humility. I mean, thank you. So I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you creating the context and the platform from conversations like this to happen. So I appreciate you, Jason.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you, our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.